Hello and welcome to another episode of Consensus with Canonizer. I am here with the mighty Canonizer Council. I'm joined by Kelly Cassidy. Kelly, how are you?
I am doing pretty darn good. Looking forward to today. Looks like it's fun topics. A bunch of fun topics.
Bunch of fun topics. Brent Alsop,
Yeah, me too.
how are you, Brent?
Good.
Well, glad to have you here. One of the things we want to do, so we're recording this rather than live streaming it, because one of the things we want to do here is people who've been watching this have had some questions as to how Canonizer works. And so I want right here, we've got a short video that we want to play that will explain that and give you a bit more insight into what Canonizer is.
Are you tired of today's world's yelling, fighting, screaming, insulting, bleeding, and tweeting? Canonizer has a better way. Share your thoughts and opinions, see what others think, and build consensus. You think, you write, and you post. Then Canonizer does the rest. Your thoughts wind their way through our patented processes and algorithms and end up here, in a qualified and quantified camp where others can see, join with you, and together change the world.
All right. So as we talk about these topics, what we're hoping you'll do as you're watching this is go on Canonizer and join the camp that best represents your point of view on each of these topics. And those topics, if there isn't a camp that represents your point of view, please feel free to make a camp that represents your point of view. And so, as we talk about these, we're going to see where we are in terms of our consensus on the Canonizer Council, and see if anybody shifts in terms of their consensus on the Canonizer Council. So I'm going to add to the stage here. This is the Canonizer homepage. Kelly, do we want? Let's start with your topic here.
Oh, great. It's in the news right now, so it makes a lot of sense, I guess. Um,
I just saw it scroll by.
Let me get to it, and I will make it stop.
There it is.
I passed it. There we go. So mine is about Joe Biden. The recent revelations about his health, his mental fitness for office, things like that. Now, I'd like to start with the preface of this that a few weeks ago we had a discussion about declining trust in American institutions, and you and I had pretty significant disagreements on the cause. But this annual Gallup survey from um, the 2001 to 2024 showed declining level of trust in churches, public education, Congress, the presidency, media, almost everything except for small business. So hooray for small businesses. And I think this kind of relates to that. And I'm not big into conspiracy theories. Like, I don't believe astronauts. I believe astronauts landed on the moon. I don't believe a super race of lizard people secretly controls the world. I don't believe in Masons. I don't believe in widespread spread voter fraud.
You don't believe in
Um,
Masons?
I don't believe it that Masons control the world
Okay.
with
I
beliefs.
believe there are Masons.
I guess I will build consensus on that. I do believe there are Masons. I know some nice people. Um, there's a history of conspiracies that did turn out to be true, like the Tuskegee syphilis experiments and the testimony of Naira. I don't know if you remember that, but she was a Kuwaiti girl that witnessed firsthand the atrocities of Saddam Hussein's soldiers bayoneting babies. Turned out she was not Kuwaiti at all, and she was the daughter of a diplomat, and that started a war because of her testimony in Congress. But there's a lot of things that were sensationalized that turned out to be true in the 1990s, like the satanic ritual abuse scandals.
Turned
Yeah,
out
that's
not to be true.
turned out not to be true. Like, that was everybody was believing in this. It was on the news, it was reported often, and it turned to be completely false. And that said, I do believe in a couple of conspiracy theories, even though they're not supported by facts. I believe that Epstein's death wasn't a suicide, even though even the new FBI director said he's looked at the evidence and it was for sure a suicide. Um, I believe that COVID-19 was caused by a leak in the Wuhan lab. Um, but the one that I've been wondering about for a couple of years is that Joe Biden was actually the functional president of the United States of America. Um, you would see him on TV, you would see him slipping up, you would hear the White House dismiss all those things as deep fakes, excuses like he had a cold, um, that kind of thing. So that's what brings me to today's topic. And I guess we can even say, is it a conspiracy theory or anything else? Which, by the way, I think that'd be a fun topic in the future. Conspiracy theories that we believe. Um, but when you look at it, the recent book that's come out, Original Sins, has a lot of claims. Jake Tapper says he's used 200 administration and congressional sources for his book. They're all anonymous, but Vanity Fair magazine had a headline: Democrats can't ignore the damning new details about Joe Biden's decline. The New York Times says of the book, it points to Biden's decline and Democrats' cowardice. The Washington Post, Democrats rattled again by fresh claims that Biden aids hit his frailty. USA Today, Biden didn't deceive Democrats about his decline. Let me say it different. Biden didn't deceive Democrats about his decline. It's time for them to admit the truth. Um, and that follows 4 years of people saying, like Morning Joe, a host on NBC, I'm going to tell you the truth and F word you if you can't handle the truth. This version of Biden, intellectually and analytically, is the best Biden ever. Nicole Wallace, a reporter, said in June of 2024 that videos and photos of Biden wandering off or looking lost, staring into space, were cheap fakes, videos of real events that are manipulated to fuel viewers, and that right-wing media deceitful behavior to even question Biden's fitness for office. So that's kind of the background of this. When you go to the agreement statement, there's a lot of information about what's come out. It talks about the Robert Hur report after finding classified documents in Biden's basement, and said that it would be difficult to convince a jury that they should convict him because of his mental state. That he's an elderly man with poor memory. And that was also dismissed by the White House and Democrats in Congress and much of the media. And so to sum it up, Van Jones, a former Obama White House advisor, and he's a current CNN contributor, said of the Biden things, this is a crime against the republic. So that all said, we also now know that Joe Biden has a very aggressive form of prostate cancer. In the research I've done, it looks like for every one doctor that said it would be a normal advancement of this type of cancer, there's 10 that say it could have been caught a decade ago or more, and that as president, he should have received annual checkups for this kind of thing. So that said, there are currently 3 camps you can look at. One is there's nothing to worry about. Let's look to the future and not the past. The second one is this is a constitutional crisis. Who made decisions when Joe Biden couldn't? And finally, typical. More books about presidents making misleading claims for profit. Which one do you want to look at?
Which one do you support?
Right now, I don't think it was a constitutional crisis, but that's probably closest to the one that I believe. The 29th or the 25th Amendment of the Constitution was made specifically to address a situation like this. We found out from cabinet officials even that they went almost a year without ever having any contact with the president. They were prevented from seeing him. He was shielded by his closest White House advisors. Um, why didn't Kamala Harris take over the functioning head of the United States government? She was an elected person. Um, we saw that Jill Biden was conducting the few cabinet meetings that were held. Um, and according to CNN, their own report said that some members of President Joe Biden's cabinet did not believe that he could be relied on to perform during an emergency. But so, does this rise to the level of constitutional crisis? No, I don't think it's quite there, but I think it does rise to the level of maybe a congressional investigation and identifying when and under what circumstances a president's suspected decline should be presented to Congress. Maybe that's where I'm standing right now.
Well, presented to Congress, Congress's only recourse would be to impeach a president, whereas the 25th Amendment allows for an incapacitated president to be removed by virtue of unanimity among his cabinet.
It also requires a two-thirds vote of Congress. So it's kind of, yeah, there's multiple parts to it. Um, but there's got to be a method. I know that there's times like when a president needs to keep things secret. In a time of national emergency, you don't want to show weakness. That was evidence in World War II. The president was in a wheelchair. That was never reported on because it might jeopardize morale of the troops and things. So I get that. But there ought to be a more standardized way to bring out obvious disabilities of a president into the open. Um, I'm thinking, there can be a lot of just um, angry people that will complain about something. You kind of got to have a way to filter through that. I don't fault like Jean Pierre for standing up at the White House podium and now in hindsight lying to the public because I believe that's a White House's job. They're supposed to be open, but they're also supposed to present the president and his views in the best light that they can.
Well, I just pulled up the 25th Amendment, and you are correct that Congress can remove by two-thirds vote, but the process is, um, okay, so if the president dies, in case of the Section 1, in case of the removal of the president from office or of his death or resignation, the vice president shall become president, period. And then Section 2 talks about getting a new vice president. And Section 3 is whenever the president transmits to the president pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives his written declaration that he is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, and until he transmits to them a written declaration to the contrary, such powers and duties shall be discharged by the vice president as acting president. So, if the president dies, it's very clear the vice president becomes the president. But if the president admits that they're not capable of conducting their duties, and then the vice president becomes acting president. Now, the next section is the one that's interesting. Whenever the vice president and majority of either the principal officers of the executive departments transmit to the president of the Senate and the Speaker of the House their written declaration that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, the vice president shall immediately assume the powers and duties of the office as acting president. So right there, you wouldn't need congressional action to do that unless when the president transmits, this is later on, if the president transmits his written declaration that no inability exists, he shall resume the powers and duties of his office. And so if there is a discrepancy over this, if the president insists, no, I'm not disabled, no, I can serve, then the Congress jumps in and by a two-thirds vote can remove him. Uh,
Yes.
so it's really fascinating to me to look at this. I mean, if I look at the camps that you've got there, the reality is that this isn't a constitutional crisis because Joe Biden is no longer president. The rea
Correct.
I mean, the reality is there's nothing that can be done. Was it a constitutional crisis that we ignored? That's an academic question, uh, which it, w- it's it reminds me a little bit of Donald Trump's second impeachment, uh, when he was, in my mind, rightfully charged with inciting an insurrection, and Mitch McConnell, the president of the Senate at the time, said, or the majority leader of the Senate. President of the Senate is the vice president. The majority leader at the time said, "Look, yes, he did this. Yes, he is guilty of this. However, he is no longer president, so it doesn't matter." And
Right. And I get that argument too. I'm just thinking, what if in the future another president is in a similar situation? I think there should be a method in place for a whistleblower with some knowledge, not just an angry person, can go to and spell it out. A bipartisan committee in both houses of Congress to lay out their case, which at that point it becomes known publicly um, to somebody who can then decide whether or not to um, pursue the 25th Amendment.
but
Because right now, working in a vacuum, the White House people showed that they couldn't do that. No, and maybe I'm making some suppositions here, but let's suppose that Biden, as evidenced by his publicly available schedules, was able to do nothing. He got up, had a security briefing, and then many speculate that the long 4-hour pause that says presidential time meant napping, and then he would usually have dinner. So, like, there were 3 things on his schedule. So, what if during that time he really was a vegetable, but whoever was in the future, whoever is going to be the chief of staff decides that they're better at running the country than the president anyway, and so they just keep saying everything's fine, throw out a few pictures every now and then to show that he's fine, and the government keeps on functioning without him. Shouldn't that be a situation where somebody in one of the other branches of government should know that the third co-equal branch of government is not doing what its constitutional duty is?
well, two responses to that. One, the idea of yawning lengths of periods of executive time was something that was introduced in the first Trump administration, where it was very clear that he was using that executive time to watch Fox News and watch television. He wasn't a vegetable, but he certainly wasn't engaged in any kind of activity that was managing the country. I'm not aware that that continued into the Biden administration, but I will take your word for it that it did. Um, but the second thing is that what was demonstrated also in the first Trump administration, and it was demonstrated in 1998 or 1990, I guess it was 1999 when Clinton was impeached. But what was demonstrated by the impeachment process is that impeachment is entirely a political process.
Absolutely.
It is not at all a legal process. A president can commit murder on national television, and Congress can choose not to impeach. And the flip side is the president can be impeached because Congress doesn't like his hair and removed
Absolutely.
from office as a result. It has nothing to do
Yep.
with any kind of legal basis. So what you're describing here is a legal process, or at least a medical process, whereby certain triggers would be triggered, and therefore the president would be deemed incapacitated as the result of some kind of objective process, when in fact, constitutionally, there is absolutely no allowance for that because if the president insists that they are not incapacitated, then Congress has to vote by a two-thirds majority, and there is
Yep.
nothing compelling Congress to vote to remove him, um, even if he is a drooling vegetable, and even if it's very clear if his party refuses to convict. I mean, it's not a conviction because this
No,
wasn't.
yeah, it's a remove.
But, but it,
I get all that.
but it's the
But
same process. It's a political. It's a 100% a political process. How would you codify a process, an objective process to remove an incapacitated president?
well,
Uh,
I think it would be. I think it would be more like a security briefing that certain members of the House Intelligence and Senate Intelligence committees have. You know, that's bipartisan. Um, it's it typically, historically, has not been a fight, but just to make it into place. You can't go around the 25th Amendment, but some way where a concerned person, with direct involvement, a cabinet secretary, a high-ranking official in the White House could approach that and would be compelled to do so by law.
that's the
The
point because right now there there's nothing stopping a cabinet official from doing that. They
Yes,
can do that, but they don't. But
I
they didn't want to do that in the Biden administration. How would you create a law to compel them to do that?
and maybe well, there's a lot of laws that are written that don't do anything, but I'd feel more comfortable knowing that there was at least a mechanism in place where a whistleblower in the White House would have a way to raise their concerns to somebody outside the White House. Um, and that there
What's
would be
stopping them from
a
doing that now? What's
well, there's politics. Obviously, it's politics, but but yeah, again, I believe that there should be some way other like again, we got the 25th Amendment, great. But if something happens where a president is unable to do his duties and is being hid from the public and prevented from doing it, a way for an elected official to do it. So again, there's problems with it, and I'll grant you that too. But I think that there should be a way to solve it.
well, okay, I'm open to hearing that because what you're talking about, it reminds me also of people who talk about we need to get money out of politics.
Yeah, which isn't ever going to happen. We're never
Also get money out of politics, and every law that's designed to get money out of politics just ends up shoving the money in different directions. And so when you say, okay, well, we need to have some sort of way, when I ask you what's preventing them and you say politics, then the presumption then is that whatever law that you would champion would be some that would take politics out of this process. And there's no possible way to take politics out of this process. If the president's party wants a vegetable to be sitting in the Oval Office, there is no legal recourse that can be taken independent of a political process that could remove them. I can't imagine a single a law that would exist. I can't imagine what that law would look like. Can you imagine? Brent, you've been quiet listening to this. Do you want to weigh in here?
Yeah, well, this has been I'm the one supporter of nothing to worry about camp. Let's look to the future. But this is very educational to me. So yeah.
Let's look at that camp. Yeah. Only rigid hierarchies become non-functional when decapitated, but the U.S. is a bottom-up democracy. We don't need to make more rules and red tape, which can never cover all possibilities. Just let people lead. Because, I mean,
Well, then there's other stuff here. Like Joe Biden had health issues in office. So what? He was an old man, but he performed the job of president of the United States well enough. Previous
that's not what I'm saying. It's very well.
yeah, and I actually wrote that. So previous presidents had problems that were covered up. FDR's use of wheelchair. We talked about that. Kennedy's mistresses. Nixon's Watergate. Reagan's Iran-Contra affair.
Reagan also was diagnosed with Alzheimer's within what 2 years of leaving office.
Yeah. Yep.
No, it was later than that.
Yeah. It was after office, and it was enough time where
There were
at least
plenty of people who insisted after the fact that he was showing signs of decline
yeah.
while he was in office.
reports of him sleeping in cabinet meetings, nodding off, things like that.
So so yeah, I mean, I think belaboring this, because I think we can debate whether or not, I don't think the idea that Joe Biden was a vegetable holds any water. But again, I think the camp Brent's supporting here is probably the correct one, in that, I mean, we can debate about it. How many angels can dance on the head of a pin? The reality is that voters saw Biden's decline in that first debate, to the point where Biden could not legitimately continue as a candidate, and ended up dropping out of the race. And so I think that's probably the best solution that anybody could hope for, because the will of the American people, in a sort of bottom up way, largely forced Joe Biden out of reelection. This is where, incidentally, I am so frustrated with the Biden administration, is that Joe Biden was sold to us in 2020 as a transition candidate. It was very clear. I wanted Joe Biden to win in 2020, not because I supported his agenda so much as I wanted to stop the bleeding of way out of control abnormality of what Donald Trump had done and what Donald Trump is now doing, now that he's back in office. I wanted somebody normal. Didn't matter to me whether or not he was any good. It was, I want somebody who is not completely destroying all democratic norms. And I want somebody else to run in 2024. Hopefully, I wanted someone else to run as a Republican in 2024 too. I thought that was the end of the Trump era. Biden was a transition figure, and both the Democrats and the Republicans would then move forward. And instead, Biden entrenched himself, refused to give up power, and I think is what cost Kamala Harris the election. If she had run as a candidate from the outset, and had a long enough campaign to introduce herself, and wasn't tied to the Biden failures or any other Democratic candidate, didn't have to be Kamala Harris, they would have had an opportunity to make a case against Donald Trump that Donald Trump couldn't have skewered by tying it all to Joe Biden's decline, which he did very successfully. So my big problem with Biden is he ran again, and he shouldn't have run again, and everybody around him knew he shouldn't have run again, and yet he did, and that torpedoed our chance to save the country from another Trump administration.
Yeah. And that was a good ending. I want to throw one other thing in. Like, there's no doubt that the Republican Congress is going to hold hearings on this. I hope that they're just not theater, and I hope they can come to some conclusion as a way to deal with this for future presidents.
How can they be anything but theater?
Well, that's again, it's politics, but
It-
theater
it's
theater
it's
can
theater.
have a conclusion, and
Yeah, but
there can be a lesson from the past that can be passed on to generations later. So
all right.
there you go. And I'd like to suggest now would be a great time to take a break. We're probably a little later than we should be, but how about if we take a break before the next topic?
Okay. What, we want to stop recording?
No, no, just so we can put in like the other video or something.
Which video we're going to put in?
The one from the Ukrainians, the Ukraine gal. Another something about how to use Canonizer.
Okay, I'll do a quick little transition here. So I think that adequately concludes discussion of this topic. I want to give everybody watching a little more a chance to weigh in here. Here's another video that talks a bit more about what Canonizer is and what Canonizer does. Okay. All right. Well, let's shift gears a little bit, because my topic, I think, is kind of close to this one. And I want to get into a topic that maybe is a little less political. Canonizer is not solely a political platform. Brent, let's talk about your topic about out-of-body experiences?
Okay. Yeah, there's obviously a lot of things like phantom limb pain, out of body experiences that a lot of people take as proof that there's brain independent sentience. There's
So, you are firmly in the camp that, out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences. Do you differentiate between the 2? People
no
talk about out-of-body experiences, not necessarily in near-death circumstances.
right, right. And there's ways if you Google it on the internet, there's ways to induce out of body experiences, and people can do that. You set up a camera system and you have someone touch your back and it's an elaborate process, but it's a way to experience being out of your body.
Well, Brent or Kelly, have either of you ever had an out-of-body experience?
I have, and it might be not be what you're talking about, but I have very, very lucid dreams, and in many of them, I am observing myself, even in bed sometimes, from some distance away, looking at my body sleeping or looking at my body doing any number of other things. Um,
But
the
you wouldn't classify that as something actually coming out of your body. You would
well,
recognize that that's a dream, that
well,
to some
at
degree,
the
it's hallucination.
yeah, at the time, it seemed like it was a real thing, and then, at some point, either I wake up or something else, I determine that it's not, but
But
Interesting.
neither of you would cite that as evidence of brain-independent sentience, as the idea
Right.
that consciousness survives the physical body
no,
or
no.
exists outside the physical body. I mean, because I think the best evidence for that, I mean, I'm fascinated by near-death experiences and fascinated by how common, what happens in them is. I mean, people talk about the tunnel, they talk about the light or seeing, dead loved ones, and a lot of that, eh, you can chalk that up to hallucination, but what's interesting is just how profound those experiences are to the people who have them, and uh, they describe complete shifts in their focus in life, and they become they no longer fear death. They become far kinder. They quit their jobs and focus more on things that, instead of making money, are more focused on helping other people. I mean, they're transformative. And when you talk to people about their near death experiences, they talk about them in ways that say that they are more real than reality. That what happened then is just seem more real than reality. And I don't know, Kelly, if you would describe your lucid dreams in that respect. I mean, do they seem like reality, or when
Eh, yeah, like I have dreams like Inception where I wake up and realize I'm asleep, but I'm still dreaming that.
I mean,
I see that point.
how do you respond to people who say that their near death experiences are more real than reality?
Well, it's always important to distinguish between reality and knowledge of reality. So your knowledge of reality can be more lucid and more um because if you know something, that knowledge must be something physical. It doesn't make sense to have knowledge that isn't something physical. And so more real than reality. That just me for example, I've had dreams where I have higher resolution knowledge of my environment. It's higher resolution, it's more vivid, and I don't know if that's what you mean by more real than reality. So more real than reality, does that mean it's higher resolution? Does that mean it has more qualities, more colors? What exactly does that mean? So to me, you always have to throw the knowledge of reality and distinguish between if you know something, there must be physical that is that knowledge.
Well, okay.
Interesting point.
I am creating a new camp, um, because um, where I stand, the title of the camp, and I'm going to create a statement, I think, at some point in the future. I won't do that here while we're recording. But I think there is difference between Can you refresh this, Kelly,
Absolutely.
and so you can see where my new camp is? It's a camp without a statement.
Oh,
Evidence?
cool.
Yes. Proof? No. People when there is no proof say, okay, there is no evidence." Ricky Gervais loves to go around and tell everybody there's no evidence that there is a God. I think there's a great deal of evidence that there is a God, but there's no conclusive proof that there is a God. So I would look at this. I mean, as I hear near death experiences and I hear all of this, I think this is worth considering. And it's certainly evidence for at least the possibility that consciousness survives death. So I think that's where I come down on this. Kelly, where are you on this?
I'm probably close to you, Jim. But, with my personal experiences, something weird happens. Another part of dream, which I know this isn't directly what he's talking about, but what Brent's talking about. But have you ever woken up from a dream and had the clearest vision of the answer to a question that you've ever had before?
I've
Like
had that.
that happens to me too. And that's not a near death experience, but it's just kind of going where I'm kind of leading that something happens in your mind that makes really weird things happen. And uh, whether or not what results in near death experience, I don't know.
Yeah, that's
So,
part of my understanding of what sleep is. When they talk about building AI, they have to do neural training. And so that clear answer that you wake up with, that's all programming that makes it all make sense. And until that programming is done in your brain, that nothing is intuitive, nothing makes sense. But if you have a good night's sleep where your neural brain is reprogramming your neurons with that programming, so you wake up from that lucid understanding, complex understanding is what it is. To me, that's what the purpose of sleep is neural programming.
Well, okay, Brent. What would it take to get you to switch camps?
To me, it's a matter of faith and hope because people hope that something can rise after death. But to me, that would be the worst possible of all situations. So it's not a matter of reality. It's a matter of what do we hope and what do we make true. Because you say evidence, yes, proof, no. Can you imagine an angel that can provide evidence that wasn't sufficient to be proof? But to me, that's damnation. That would be hideous in hell to be such an angel
Well,
trying to influence this world.
but the construct that you're creating here is a world where, okay, you die, and then this angel or spirit or ghost, as you're
Mhm,
describing it,
mhm.
comes out of your body, exists outside of your body, and is essentially hanging around uh, other people with bodies who haven't died. So the angels are all just sort of congregating, wandering
Right.
around. Um,
And you can provide evidence that you exist, but you can't provide proof.
but no, I
That
don't.
would be hell.
But I mean, in terms of near death experiences, people who describe going on to the next world
Mm,
do not describe going on and saying, and then I was hanging out all day at my old house. The way, ghost stories talk about haunting a house.
right.
They talk about going to a
Mm,
different world
mm, right.
where they're not congregating around us, where they're not trying to influence what's happening here, where they're involved
Mhm.
in whatever it is that's part of the next consciousness. Would that be hell to you? That it's just sort of a transfer from this world to another one?
So in other words, you're saying your parents would lose interest in our lives and go on to some
No, I'm not
dimension
saying that at all. I'm saying that your parents would be somewhere else. It's not that they've lost interest in you, it's that they don't have access to you. They're not Thenthorgy.
Excuse me.
They're not watching you. They're not trying to nudge you. They have moved to some other kind of existence that, they no longer have access to you, and they no
don't
longer
have
want
access to
to.
you.
They're waiting for you to join them in that existence.
I think this is very interesting. I think maybe in future things we can kind of take each piece of that,
Yeah. Good idea.
like philosophical discussions, religious discussions. Those are fun. So, Jim, I'm fascinated by your topic, and I think I might surprise you that we are going to agree more than I bet you think we are.
Well, all right. So here we are on the front page of Canonizer again. Can you pull that topic up?
Absolutely. There we go.
All right. The topic is President Trump's acceptance of a jet from Qatar acceptable? And create an agreement camp. The way Canonizer works is you try to put everything that nobody disagrees with here in this agreement camp, and it just sort of frames the issues. But I don't know, and Kelly, you'll have to set me right, but I don't know how anybody could look at this and answer, yes, this is acceptable. This is just fine for a president of the United States to accept a $400 million gift from a foreign power in direct violation of the Constitution's emoluments clause. This is great. There's nothing wrong with this. It's entirely legal. It's entirely fine, and we shouldn't be at all concerned. I'm not alone in that. People who agree with me in this regard are not just all of the wild eyed liberals. There are people like Ben Shapiro, who is nobody's liberal and points out that if Joe Biden had done this, there would be impeachment hearings started immediately afterwards. The other person that's surprising who's come out against this is Laura Loomer, who is an absolute lunatic by any standard of the imagination, hardcore Trump loyalist, hardcore right winger, and absolutely sees this as, quote, a stain on the presidency. And as if can you pull up the consensus tree there
Yep.
and the statement? Um, uh, okay, so that's your camp.
Yep. Yep. But let's look at yours here.
So here we go. Uh, One of the things that the paragraph down there, um, Donald Trump has not merely pushed the boundaries of what is legally or ethically acceptable. He has bulldozed through them. The acceptance of this jet is not just improper, it is emblematic of a pattern of disregard for constitutional norms, accountability, and the public trust. My biggest problem with Donald Trump is not that it's not necessarily even his policies. I have been a Republican for the vast majority of my life, and it's not that, geez, politically, I just disagree with Donald Trump. My biggest problem with Donald Trump is his decimation and devastation of ethical, political, cultural norms. Donald Trump is not normal. This is not normal. This is not something that we would ever be discussing in any other administration with anything but the but abject contempt. Doesn't matter if it were a Republican or a Democrat, if it were Ronald Reagan, if it were Barack Obama, everybody should look at this and say, this is so obviously wrong. And it's not even, I mean, Trump tries to frame it, well, they're giving it to the country, they're not giving it to an individual. Well, they've already said that they're going to transfer ownership of the jet after Trump's term to the Trump Presidential Library, so Trump will have personal access to it. I mean, this is a personal gift to the President of the United States of $400 million. Are they doing this out of the goodness of their heart because they just love Donald Trump and they want nothing in return? I mean, for all of the consternation over, and rightfully so, consternation over Hunter Biden's corruption with regard to his involvement in Ukraine and leveraging his father's influence in gaining wealth for himself. The Republicans were falling all over themselves, and Hunter Biden's laptop became the biggest issue in the country for a certain subsection of Republicans. And they're all turning a blind eye to this, which is just so grotesquely, obviously, exactly what the Constitution was written to prohibit. It just it blows my mind that we're even considering the possibility that there is something salvageable or normal about this. So, uh, there's my stand on it. Uh, do we agree more than you think? I think we would agree.
I think we agree. I'm going to go a different approach though. Um, Accepting gifts on the behalf of the United States is fine, and there's a long history of doing that. George Washington was the first president who received a expensive gift. It was a donkey from the King of Spain. The Resolute desk was a gift from Queen Victoria of the British Empire. Baby elephants were given to Ronald Reagan and to Dwight Eisenhower from Sri Lanka and French Africa. Ethiopia's emperor gave a lion to Teddy Roosevelt. Saudi Arabia gave Obama um, matching bikes for Mr. and Mrs. Obama and a box of Cuban cigars. A pair of gold-plated diamond and sapphire encrusted horse sculptures, a chronometer, a set of golf clubs, a golf bag, and those were worth $523,000. Queen of Brunei gave Mrs. Obama jewelry worth $71,000. The first ladies got other jewelry worth $1.1 million. And all those were turned over to the United States government consistent with U.S. laws. By the way, George Bush was given bikes from Slovenia, Israel, and Germany, and also 300 pounds of raw meat from Argentina. So, I mean, there's a long history of taking expensive gifts. I'm not comparing a $400 million jet to hundreds of thousands of dollars in jewelry for Ms. Obama, but
Were turned over to the United States.
yes,
She does
And-
not have access to now.
correct. And the jet has been turned over to the United States Air Force. Now, whether or not it's going to go someplace else, I'm not going to agree with that part because I don't know that. I hear a lot of speculation. But I'm going to go back to this. Donald Trump just completed a Middle East trip, the first foreign trip of his second term, and even his harshest critics are saying that it was a success. Now, I brought some business, $2 trillion in investment back. Now, some of it had already been done, but it was accelerated. You've got a huge Boeing contract, a huge contract for Boeing, um, and hopefully these are the things that are going to come from it. Better relations with countries to put pressure on Russia and China and Iran, pressure to eliminate the Houthi, Hamas, and other terrorist attacks. Economics, by doing that, they're doing economic incentives to Qatar and Syria. In the coming days, hopefully, the plan, the prayer, the focus of this trip is to add more countries to the Abraham Accords to finally have diplomatic relations and hopefully peace that's in the Middle East. And he even met with the Syrian president, which was, I think, a gutsy and dangerous move, but it might turn out to be good because perhaps with a new government, even though it's run by a former terrorist, they can quit supporting Iran, quit supporting terrorism, and quit supporting Russia and allow America to fill the void, and freedom will spread everywhere. Now, again, even Trump's harshest critics have been spectacularly optimistic and praising this trip. And it's all overshadowed by a jet.
Well,
Don't accept the jet.
well, what
Don't
you-
do it.
even bringing up the successful trip is a way of normalizing Trump. I mean, who cares? Who cares?
Oh,
It could have been the most successful trip in the universe. Trump could have cured cancer and made people immortal. And I mean, whatever wildly wonderful thing Trump could have done magically, or or with his brilliance, none of that makes this acceptable. None of
I know. I think legally it's good. It's fine, but it looks awful. My camp is,
time.
well, again, it's a gift. It's a gift to the United States of America.
But it's not.
Period.
It's a gift also, they made it very clear that it's a gift that will be available to Trump after his presidency for his personal use.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's the case, but
You're not sure that
accepting.
that
Yeah, I
you're not
am
sure that
not
it's
willing.
legal, or you're not sure that that's not what Qatar is on,
I
because that's
I
Qatar is on.
yeah, I don't think that that can happen. I think that there's a jet that the Air Force, as of right now, has not accepted. They haven't transferred the paperwork. The easiest way to do this is to take the win on your foreign policy trip to the Middle East, tell Qatar they appreciate the gift, but you can't accept it, and send it back.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm looking at your camp here. I mean, we both agree it's not just that it, but where I can't agree with you, it's not that just that it looks awful. It's not just the appearance. It's that it is exactly what the emoluments clause is designed to prevent. It is, I saw an editorial cartoon the other day that had next to Trump, and Nixon says, "I am not a crook," and Trump says, "I'm a crook, so what?" That
Yes.
seems to be exactly this is the thing that drives me crazy, is that Trump is not hiding his corruption. Anybody can look at this and recognize that this is a corrupt transaction. Anybody, it doesn't matter where you are, if Laura Loomer can see this is corrupt, anybody can see that this is corrupt. And the fact that we're that I firmly believe that if Joe Biden had done this, you would see Republicans in the House calling for his impeachment, and I think they'd be right to do it. And Donald Trump has crossed so many of these lines and pushed so many of these boundaries that this is another drop in the bucket. It's just one more thing Donald Trump has done that has destroyed a constitutional norm. I mean, Donald Trump, the first thing he did when he got into office, and we're not even talking about it anymore, was say that the 14th Amendment no longer guarantees birthright citizenship. And it's now before the Supreme Court. And based on the questioning in the Supreme Court, it seems like the 14th Amendment will survive
Sure.
Trump's
Sure
attempt
it
to
will.
unilaterally pretend it isn't there. But this is what the Trump administration, this is what Donald Trump does, is that he just completely destroys ethical, constitutional, moral norms. And we're all supposed to just roll with it and roll with the punches and go, oh, golly, maybe you shouldn't do that. When in fact, this is so far beyond the pale that it demonstrates that this man is entirely unfit for the office that he holds. And but the reality is there's nothing we can do about it, because as we talked about when we discussed Biden's incapacitation, um, it's a political process. There's no legal process. There's no way to say, look, this is direct violation of the emoluments clause. You need to be removed from office. He won't be removed from office unless Republicans decide to do that, unless 2/3 of the Senate decides to do that, and that's never going to happen. So we're stuck with the fact that this president is above the law. I mean, he's objectively above the law. The law does not apply to the president of the United States, because when he violates the law and he violates the Constitution, there are no consequences. There are no, I mean, he's already ignoring a 9-0 Supreme Court decision, talking about how he needs to make sure he brings back this a person he wrongfully deported to El Salvador that's now in El Salvador in prison. And what can you do? I mean, this is the thing that everybody is scared of, is that when he ignores the Constitution, when he ignores the judiciary, there's no enforcement mechanism. There's no way to stop him. The fact that Donald Trump does whatever the hell he wants to do, there is absolutely no check or balance on the way this man behaves. And the fact that he is behaving in ways that are outside the bounds of normalcy, decency, ethics, it's just so abhorrent to me that I just don't know what to do with myself.
Well, you won't be surprised by this. I'm going to disagree with just about everything you just said, But I think we can agree Donald Trump should not accept the jet. That I think we can agree on.
Okay. Okay.
What do you think?
I think you're straining at gnats and swallowing a camel. You see this as an optics problem. You don't see this as an ethical problem.
I believe that that there are right now accepting a gift on behalf of the United States. Now, whether if he takes it for his personal use after he's been president, then that would cause all sorts of issues, and at that point, he should probably be tried and convicted of something. But right now, accepting it on behalf of the United States is acceptable, but don't do it because it's stupid.
Okay. And this is what breaks my heart, is that this is normal to you. This has
Well,
been
Jim,
normalized. This is
no,
acceptable.
no. Okay. Was I upset when the Obamas accepted millions, literally, definitionally, numbering, like millions of dollars in jewelry on behalf of the United States? No, it's fine. Was I upset when George Bush accepted 3 bicycles from foreign countries? No. Am I upset that Donald Trump has been offered a jet? No. Am I upset that he would accept it, no, don't take it. Period.
But
And like at another point we can talk about everything else. Like we can talk if you want to at a future date.
comparing bicycles to a $400 million jet shows just how far the standards have fallen. Every time I think that Donald Trump can't go any lower, the more I realize there is no bottom. There's absolutely no bottom. There is absolutely nothing that Donald Trump could do where his supporters would say, now this is beyond the pale. When Donald Trump said he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and he wouldn't lose any voters, he was absolutely right. And it's a scathing indictment of the moral character of the American electorate.
Yeah. And again, I'll disagree with that too. But can we agree that Donald Trump should not accept the Qatari jet?
Well, the Canonizer is about consensus, and that's where the consensus is. It just makes me sad that we can't get a deeper consensus. It makes me sad that I have more in common with Laura Loomer on this issue than I have in common with you. But
Well, Laura Loomer doesn't think he should accept it either.
no, but Laura Loomer also recognizes that it's not just bad optics; it's rampant corruption that makes him unfit to be president of the United States. So, all right. So we have determined where the consensus is. If you agree with Kelly, if you agree with me, you have 2 camps you can join. If you think this is wonderful, you can create a camp to say that. But we hope that everybody will take the opportunity to weigh in here.
I got a suggestion.
Sure.
Maybe somebody, if they want, they could suggest the next topic.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
going to canonizer.com, creating a camp.
So yeah, just send an email to support@canonizer.com and we'll get it.
Yeah, support at canonizer.com will get to us. If there's a topic you want us to discuss, we would love to be able to do that. So, any final parting words, parting thoughts, Kelly or Brent?
Yeah, it's been fun. Thanks all.
I think I'm going to go have a dream.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So there is life after the Canonizer podcast, but we hope you will join us for our next one next week. We appreciate you being here with us with Consensus with Canonizer. Thanks, guys.